Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, guys, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Rumble. And I'm very happy to have my friend Vanessa Beeley with me today from Damascus. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming to the show. For those who don't know, I'm sure most of the followers know you. You're an investigative journalist, an independent journalist now based in Syria, and your opinions and your investigations went viral during the Syrian war, and you're one of the first people who debunked many of the myths surrounding around the Syrian crisis and the Syrian war. So thank you so much for coming to the show.
You're welcome, Kevork. It's lovely to be on with you again. I always enjoy it.
Actually, I made a rule on this channel that I am an free speech absolutist, unlike Elon Musk, which means that I don't delete comments, people who disagree with me. Even when people come and just attack me, calling me names or stuff, I don't delete comments and I don't ban people from the channel. But when people are coming to slander my guest, and in this case yourself, and they're calling you whatever it is, especially when it comes to the vaccines in this case, I wouldn't tolerate that, especially when it's not about objective criticism, but rather calling names for my guest, and also threatening my channel with reporting that this person, whoever she says she is a medical professional and she's going to report this video to YouTube. So I didn't only delete this comment, I also banned this person from commenting on my channel ever again. And whatever we discuss in this video, those are our own opinions. You are free to make up your mind, and you can follow the guidelines. You can go to whatever authorities you believe in and check the efficacy and the safety of any of the vaccines and make up your mind. What we're doing here is a critical discussion, a brainstorming, and you can take it or leave it. But our advice, and my advice especially for you, is to read, to research, to dig in, and make up your mind. That's all what we're asking, and we hope that YouTube would tolerate that. But before we start this conversation, this past week, 10 days, it was very, very, in my opinion, critical, especially in the UK. We have Richard Medhurst was stopped in the airport and he was detained for 24 hours. His electronics were confiscated and interrogated. And you know this procedure because you passed through similar experience in the past. And also we have the case of the arrest of the UK journalist Sarah Wilkinson, and the police came to her house before 7:30 in the morning. 12 police officers in total, or what they call counterterrorism officers, and they arrested her for content that she has posted online. Her house has been raided, and they have seized all her electronic devices as well. Today, I was reading on the page of Jonathan Cook. He added some new details into this case. He says that this is an utterly. I would just screen this because it's important for the people to see what we are reading. So Jonathan's statements are this. Just a second on my software. So he says this is an utterly shocking account from journalist Sarah Wilkinson of her recent violent arrest by 16 counterterrorism police, several masked at 7:30 a.m. They smashed up or stole many of her belongings, emptied an urn of her mother's remains over the floor, have denied her the right to touch any electronic device, even a phone, though she has a potentially life-threatening medical condition, stolen her passport, which she needs to produce or it will lead to a bail infraction and possibly a 5-year jail term and much else besides. She has, of course, been stripped of the right to do journalism, all of this under Section 12 of the Draconian Terrorism Act. This is clearly intended as a campaign of terror meant to intimidate others from speaking up about Israel's genocide in Gaza. We are being reminded that you don't need to be a Julian Assange to be targeted and have your life turned upside down. We are being reminded that ultimately the UK is a police state and that our freedoms are a gift from those who rule over us. You went even further, Vanessa, in this case, and you said that you had an article on your Substack, and you said that UK is officially a Stasi state or Stasi state. I don't know how to pronounce that. I mean, first of all, I would like to hear your thoughts. How were you treated last time when you landed in the UK? Why did they stop you? What questions do they usually ask? What is this terrorism act that they are now abusing it against the journalists? And where is the UK is headed after this Gaza onslaught?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, I was detained. I wasn't arrested. I was detained under Section 7 of the Terrorist Act. Journalist Kit Clarenberg was detained under Section 4 of the Terrorist Act, I think about a year after myself. I was detained towards the end of COVID, so I think it was around November 2022, which was the first time I had gone back to the UK since 2019, only to see my family before Christmas. I was detained for 6 hours. Under Section 7, it's effectively a fishing expedition by the security forces in the UK, so MI6, MI5, through the anti-terrorist police. Now, in my case, although I was detained for 6 hours, everything was downloaded from my phone. I think I was actually one of the first journalists in the UK to be detained under this section. And they kept me for the full 6 hours, which is the maximum they can detain you. But they were, apart from the fact that you have to give fingerprints, you have to have your DNA taken, you have to have your photograph taken in kind of POW positions. You do feel psychologically that you're a criminal, that you're being treated as a criminal. But they were basically very courteous. I think what has changed since October the 7th, and now, of course, also we're in the Keir Starmer, Tony Blair government, because Tony Blair is controlling Keir Starmer and his policies. We're seeing an absolute incredible descent into totalitarianism, fascism, in my opinion. And as I said, these police are behaving like Gestapo. They're not behaving like policemen who are not even yet charging both these individuals. And also Paul Barnard, by the way, of Palestine Action, which is the group that's been leading the campaigns, direct action campaigns against Elbit Systems, one of the weapons manufacturers that is supplying Israel with weapons to genocide Palestinians. Now, of course, we're seeing it also in West Bank as well as in Gaza. And so I think now what we're seeing is an unbelievable and actually a pretty horrific increase in the methods to censor free speech as regards those that are against genocide. Because actually in Sarah Wilkinson's case, she's not necessarily, as far as I'm aware, been speaking about the armed resistance or supporting the armed resistance in her statement. She's been simply relaying the horrific events on an hourly basis that are ongoing in Gaza, which is, the genocide, the de facto genocide that's been carried out by Israel in an intensified manner since October the 7th. So she's only been reporting on the facts from the ground inside Gaza. That's it. She doesn't have an opinion on the so-called prescribed terrorist organizations, which are Hamas and Hezbollah. And here I really want to raise the question, why are Hamas and Hezbollah proscribed in the UK? What threat are Hamas and Hezbollah to UK national security? None. And both these organizations, Hamas is the official government in Gaza. Hezbollah is, of course, part of the coalition government in Lebanon. So who is the UK protecting when it is prescribing these two organizations? Of course, it's protecting the national security of Israel that is embedded in every sector of UK society. The UK state is effectively captured by the Zionist regime in every sector of British society. So that's a very important point for me to make, because we are potentially, all of us, going to be targeted for support of these two organizations, which in this region are recognized as legitimate government organizations.
Yeah, but you remember, Vanessa, during the Syrian war, when there were organized campaigns to recruit people from the UK to send them as suicide bombers to Syria. there were no attempts to stop these terrorists from coming to Syria and blowing up themselves among the civilians
Mm-hmm.
in my country where you reported from, right? This was
Mm.
something this was something more encouraged, in my opinion, because silence during this time was encouragement for these people to go. And I remember I watched a reportage, an investigation on the German ZDF on this case, which is public television. This was in 2014 or 15, a reportage on the ZDF, and the journalist was asking a question to the head of the police department or the counterterrorism department in Munich, in Bavaria. And he asked him, "Do you guys know that hundreds of Germans are going to Syria?" And his answer was very honest, brutally honest. And he said, "We don't only know that these people are going to Syria to fight alongside ISIS, we encourage them to go. If they don't have a travel document, we give them the travel document to go to Syria because they wanted to export this internal problem that they have in Germany, or in this case, in my opinion, also similar in the UK, to the outside world. If you're radicalized, we can weaponize you and send you to the war zones where there is a government that we dislike. Go and fight this government there or this army and that." So this the utter hypocrisy of truly sending suicide bombers, let's say, to Iraq and
Mhm.
Syria, fighting alongside ISIS, whereas Hezbollah and Hamas, they have never attacked, let's say, the UK or threatened the national security. You can probably think that they're radical organizations and they don't like their ideology and you despise what they stand for. But objectively speaking, these groups, they don't pose any threat
Mm.
against the UK, which comes to the question, then why? And you answer this question and you say because of the protecting the national security of Israel. This is something really baffling, seeing the governments in Europe, in the UK are protecting
Mm.
Israel more than protecting their own, let's say, national security in this case. And
Mm.
from here, it's really infuriating to see that people are, especially yourself and other journalists, are being targeted like this and abused by such a law, which is like you're treated like you're a terrorist in this case, right?
Mm. Absolutely. And just a reminder also that I think it was in 2018, Sadiq Khan in the UK offered a 6-month amnesty to British terrorists that were fighting alongside Al Qaeda in the northwest of Syria to return safely to the UK.
Mm.
And when you're talking about hypocrisy, the revoking of the British citizenship for Shamima Begum,
Yeah.
who as a 15-year-old was trafficked with the knowledge of MI6 by CIA outreach agents with her companions, all of them under the age of 16, to Syria as ISIS brides. And this isn't
Yes.
an isolated case, right? And then you have journalists like Alex Crawford of Sky News, BBC journalists. We sort of remember the Captagon report where the journalist is actually embedded with Al Qaeda or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, as it's now rebranded, in Idlib. And yet these journalists are never held to account,
Mm.
whereas they are literally embedded with those terrorist factions
They
that they
receive
have,
prizes.
yeah, that they have euphemistically called rebels and democracy bringing revolutionaries and so on, knowing full well that they are de facto terrorist organizations acting as proxies of the Western government that are now accusing genuine journalists who are trying to basically disseminate truth in contrast to the legacy media that is constantly obfuscating the truth and basically distorting and perverting it so that we get a completely misguided opinion of every single global situation that is ongoing at the moment. And there are
Yeah.
many. So it, and I just want to come back to what happened to Sarah, because you mentioned the passport. This for me was, I mean, what they did was so sinister, and she's right in that she describes it as like a Mossad or a Shin Bet
Mm.
operation, the way that they spoke to her, the racism that they demonstrated towards Palestinians in their discussions with her. the turning upside down of the urn containing her mother's ashes, and then the guy was apparently kneeling in the ashes, which is complete desecration, right? They bugged the house. She discovered this afterwards when she discovered like bits of the plaster of the wall on the floor.
Wow.
They had bugged the house. They took the bugs out. They hid her medical card, for example, in the mattress. They told her, like you said, they took her passport, but they denied taking her passport. They didn't give her evidence that they had taken the passport. And now they've told her in 7 days she has to produce her passport. So they, as she describes, they've entrapped her. And not only this, she has to take, I think, something like 3 buses to get to the office where she has to show her passport.
Mhm.
And she can't return on the same day. They told her, we'll bring a tent. You can sleep outside in November in the UK. I mean,
Wow.
this is complete. That's why I said this is just Stasi treatment of UK citizens that are not even yet charged. Right? I mean, Medhurst is also under a 3-month bail, whereas
Yeah.
I haven't seen what's actually happening as conditions of his bail, but I presume he can't leave the UK and go back to where he lives, right? So I'm assuming he's in a kind of 3-month limbo, waiting to see if they will even charge him. And
Yeah.
the same for Sarah, but with Sarah, they're literally, it appears, entrapping her in order for her to be forced to violate the bail conditions, in which case she faces 5 years imprisonment. So it's not a chilling effect, this is a freezing effect on free speech.
What do you advise to the journalists, Vanessa? I've been speaking on this channel in the past few weeks after these developing events, telling to people that speaking your mind and the truth and what you believe is the truth is nowadays is very dangerous business, and you could be arrested, detained, charged, and you could end up in jail. I mean, they have made an example out of Julian Assange,
Yeah.
and they are now this train of, let's say, suppression and coming after
Mm.
the journalists has accelerated. And I see people telling, oh, just leave, go to somewhere else, like relocate and this and that. And I totally understand that this could be one of the solutions for it, right? But do you see that if the people speak up collectively, can that make any change, or the situation is hopeless now in the European continent?
I think there is an advantage in numbers, yes. And I think now that obviously we're aware that they are ramping up the censorship, then we have to prepare ourselves. In other words, you have to have a good lawyer on the end of a phone so you can call him immediately. That's something that I've definitely done in preparation. If I go back to the UK, I don't have any plans at the moment. And in numbers, you know, the problem is that as independent media, as you know, we are relatively isolated because we're scattered all over the world in different areas of the world. And it's much harder for us to come together than the massive media complex in the West that is leading these destructive campaigns. You know, we don't have the resources, we don't have that vast cluster of organizations that has our back. We don't have insurance. We don't have that kind of legal protection that they have. But we need to start organizing something. I mean, it's interesting that Mary Kostakidis in Australia, who's a mainstream media presenter, is being now attacked by the Zionist Federation of Australia for 2 tweets. Like, and they're actually retweets. I mean, it's extraordinary. But her case is now being taken up for free, pro bono, by a legal organization in Australia. So I think as journalists, we need to start putting feelers out for legal organizations and legal representatives that are prepared to do this work for free on the basis that if not, everyone is under attack. Because, you know, it's a bit trite to say we are all Sarah
Mm.
Wilkinson or we are all etc., but it's true.
Yeah.
It can happen to any of us at any time. And the extraordinary thing is, if for example, it was Syria that was doing this, can you imagine? I know you can imagine the reaction from the West. It would be sanctions and regime change, as it was, right? But what the UK is now doing is the equivalent to a country like Saudi Arabia, one of their allies, or to Israel. All we're missing so far is the physical torture, but we've reached a point of psychological torture. This is a psychological war against independent journalists.
Yes. What's baffling is, Vanessa, is that in these countries, these politicians do still have the audacity to say that we have a democracy here, we have a freedom of speech and freedom of press. I remember a few years ago when I was targeted by a media campaign and I had to hire lawyers, multiple lawyers. It cost a hell of a money, and I did it silently because I didn't want to make my case public back then. And they drain you. Like this is the goal. They want to drain you because they know that the costs of the legal costs are very expensive, and you're not a rich person, and they know how to drain you in this case. And also they always have some it's not even weird, it's just a manipulative let's say argument, and that is, oh look, we have a freedom of press in this country, but you're not a journalist. We don't consider you a journalist, you're a propagandist, therefore the laws for the free press do not apply to you. So all of a sudden you're deprived from your journalistic status just because someone said that you're not a journalist. So this is becoming really the new norm, let's say, in these countries. I would like to also, since we're speaking about democracy, today I was preparing like a short video for my X account, and I was following what happened in Germany during these past few days when where we had two regional elections in Thuringia and in Saxony. And I found there is a new talking point now, Vanessa. Before these elections, we always had this talking point that this is a far right and this is a far left. And so they wanted to exclude them from, or discourage the people from voting to these parties, let's say, those who are in opposition of the current ruling coalition, for sending weapons to Ukraine or supporting Israel, this and that. Now we have a different talking point, and that is we have democratic parties and undemocratic parties. Even if the parties, even if a party wins the elections and the coalition considers them undemocratic, they consider themselves the winner of the election because they say that the democratic parties accumulated the most votes in this case, and the undemocratic parties are already like, we don't consider them part of the discussion. But these parties never address why a very big majority of the people voting for the far right and the far left, in this case, due to the failures of the government, skyrocketing of the prices, rents are very expensive. Nobody at my age can buy an apartment in Germany. That's like completely mission impossible. It's too expensive. Low pensions for the older people. You see them in the streets collecting the cans to recycle them, 25 cents, because it's not enough what they are receiving. Insecurity everywhere. Wherever you walk, there are knife attacks in Germany. You don't know, one day somebody could attack you. Now we're sending our taxpayer money to Russia and to Israel. So there are many reasons for these people to vote for the other parties that the coalition or the establishment parties do not really understand. Therefore, now we have this new talking point. You're undemocratic, and this is really dangerous to our democracy. So I foresee in the future that this suppression and the persecution against the journalists, it will also move to big political parties trying to ban these political parties in order to keep this exclusivity of this political approach, let's say in Ukraine or in other places. So I truly see that the future is bleak in Western Europe and in the UK, in Germany. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just being pessimistic, but I don't see that we are headed to brighter days.
No, and I think you had Alex Craner on quite recently, and I was speaking with him quite recently also, and he's actually done a really good report on the coming collapse, particularly of the UK. But of course, that is going to have the ripple effect in all of the EU, because every country that is effectively under the control of the US or in alliance with the US is committing suicide, economic suicide, by pouring billions into a failed war in Ukraine that has effectively, killed a huge percentage of the Ukrainian population, but is also costing the UK in particular. I think they're the biggest funder in this case, because Zelensky is going to default on the national debt. Of course he is. He's already made it quite clear that he's going to default on that debt. But what happens? The EU just keeps giving more money. So does the UK. And then put on top of that the support that is being given to Israel. And now we start to see with Keir Starmer's government in the UK, the measures that are coming in, the austerity measures that are coming in pre-winter, that are going to affect every single person in that population. And as Alex worked out, the debt default in the UK, I think the Bank of England is unique in the sense that it can't be allowed to go under. So the government will bail out the Bank of England by taking that money from every individual in the UK. And I think Alex worked out it's something like 2,400 per individual. But of course, then you have to extrapolate out children and people that are not working and so on. So this debt will actually fall on the shoulders of the working class and the middle class predominantly. And it will destroy the UK effectively. It's terrifying. And of course, the only way that these countries can prevent the effects of this happening is to create more war, because that creates a threat that is greater than the economic threat against these people. We know
existential threat.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
there
it's a bad future. I don't see how there's any escape from this endless cycle, basically.
In the past 3 months or 4 months, maybe a little bit more, I also found that there is a scripted rhetoric from the UK, from Germany, from France, that war is imminent against Russia. So in 5 years, we have to get ready for war with Russia, and therefore the military spending has to increase. And I was talking to the Alistair Cook on this topic, and he told me they couldn't these whoever are they with the black suits and the in dark rooms, they couldn't really convince or enforce the agenda on the people, on the environmental agenda and the corona agenda on the people, to increase this budget, increasing the budget. Therefore, they are moving now to the military sector, and that is like, we have an imminent threat coming from Russia. They wanted for Russia to invade Ukraine, so they create this scenario among the population in Europe that Russia is going to march to Europe, and we have to increase the spending, and we have to be ready in 5 years. We have to reintroduce the what do we say, the recruitment in the military.
Conscription, because that's coming in the UK, definitely. I don't know about Germany.
Yeah, so they're getting ready, let's say. If you want to open the door for anyone, for a guest,
no, it's
feel free,
electricity. Sorry, the electricity.
Okay.
When it comes on, I have like a doorbell sound.
Okay. You're more sophisticated there.
When I first came here, it used to freak me out. I used to think someone's at the door, like, who's there? But no, it's just the electricity.
And since we're speaking about this, let's say, the agendas behind science, like during the corona times, and I have to make this disclaimer again for YouTube, that we are not discouraging people to go against the guidelines of the health authorities. We're just doing brainstorming here. There are always health crises, and people were infected by corona and infected by other viruses around the world. However, the politicians find the crisis or see the crisis as an opportunity for them to advance other agendas. And this is what we are really focusing here on. But in the case of the Gaza Strip, we've seen, and this is an article that you posted again on your Substack account. I just want to screen it to the people. So you say the Zionist polio vaccine virtue signaling while they exterminate Palestinian children. Displaced infant Abdul Rahman Abdul Jadian, who it is claimed suffered from polio, sleeps at a makeshift tent camp in Deir el-Balah, central Gaza Strip, Tuesday, August 27, 2024. So we have around 45% of Gaza population would be considered children under 18 out of a population of 2.2 million. That's 1.1 million children. Israel has been slaughtering children without a ceasefire for 11 months, killing children in the cruelest ways imaginable. Whatever your vaccine perception, why would Israel suddenly allow 1 million polio vaccines into Gaza and agree to vax ceasefire to save the children they have publicly declared they want to exterminate? By the way, just for the people, the Substack of Vanessa is in the description below. I believe that's the best way to support the independent work of Vanessa Beeley, who is posting regularly, almost daily basis sometimes, because I receive notifications every time she posts articles. So you can follow her on Substack, guys, and also can support her work there. Vanessa, why do you think Israel agreed for a vax ceasefire and allowed 1 million jabs of the polio vaccine, which I did a preliminary, research, and I found out that this vaccine that they sent to Gaza is funded by Bill Gates and Melinda or what? A Bill Gates Foundation.
Melinda Gates
Melinda,
Foundation.
yeah.
Well, I think first of all, we have to put this into perspective. We're talking, or the WHO is highlighting the life of one child as important as the life of one child is, with potential polio, because I have no idea how they've managed to test it in Gaza, where there are virtually no operating hospitals. There's nothing, right? There's no equipment left. There's barely any electricity, etc., etc. And Israel has been decapitating and eviscerating children and maiming them and slaughtering them for 11 months. And in November 2023, it was an Israeli military official who actually said severe epidemics in Gaza would help Israel win the war. So in my opinion, and in the opinion of actually many experts and analysts, this is biowarfare against Palestinian children in Gaza, who, we have to remember, they are living in conditions where, for example, the vaccine-derived poliovirus can thrive, because the problems that you have in the poorest areas in the world, so in Africa, and if you remember in 2013, in Syria, with all the influx of mercenaries from Pakistan in particular that were coming to fight with Al-Qaeda and the various derivatives of Al-Qaeda, at the same time that the WHO was carrying out an oral polio vaccine campaign in Pakistan. And the Syrian government made it quite clear that polio in Syria, the wild virus as it's called, had been eradicated in 1999. But suddenly, after 2013, polio started to re-emerge as a virus inside Syria. And if you also remember, in 2013, there were 17 children killed after being given I can't remember if it was polio or measles. But anyway, the vaccination campaigns were carried out in the areas not under the government control in Syria, but under the control of the terrorist groups. And from that point onwards, there were new cases of polio emerging inside Syria. So this danger of the oral polio vaccine derived polio virus, if you see what I mean, is very, very, it's high risk. And when you introduce this vaccine into Gaza, where again, the wild virus has not been seen for a number of years, and you introduce the oral vaccine into an immune suppressed environment where there is there's no sanitation, there's no clean water, there's no medical care, there's no medicines, there's no food, there's nothing. And there are multiple skin diseases like scabies and so on that are emerging now because of this lack of sanitation and the hideous trauma that these children and elderly are living in. And then you want to introduce this oral vaccine, which, as I say, is responsible in those environments for shedding the virus and actually enabling the virus to spread. Whether you believe in vaccines or not, this is the reality, right? So this is, in my opinion, nothing short of biowarfare in collaboration with the WHO, clearly, because they know this fact. They know, so does Bill Gates. They know that in Africa, in Yemen, the same situation, the polio vaccine basically introduced polio back into the country because, again, the people that were receiving the oral vaccine were living in conditions, and it can be passed through human waste.
Yeah.
Gazans are literally living in human waste. Yes. Sorry to say it like this, but that's always been a problem in Gaza. Even when I was there in 2012, when it was raining, literally the sewage was coming to the surface. And so, in my opinion, there has to be a degree of skepticism over Israel's sudden humanitarian reflex when it has effectively declared an intent to kill Palestinian children, to exterminate Palestinians. And if we look at it in a very dark light, which I tend to as regards the Zionist entity, this is potentially the eradication of a large percentage of the next generation of Palestinians inside Gaza. And not forgetting there's no escape from this. So not only are the conditions appalling and squalid, thanks to the Zionist entity, but they're enclosed. Now the majority of the population is squeezed onto the beaches, not even in houses. They're in tents, living in incredibly hot temperatures this time of year. All the conditions that foment disease and spread disease are now available. So why now, on the basis that one single child potentially has polio, why now do they want to introduce 1 million vaccines? And many people have used the argument to me, well, yeah, but the Zionists are protecting themselves. No, the IOF were given the injection vaccine like at least 1 month, 2 months ago, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you believe in vaccine pharmacology, they are immunized basically in the minds of the Israelis. So no, this has nothing to do with the Zionists protecting their own, nothing. They've already done that before they introduce the vaccine that they know to be the most dangerous to the Palestinians in Gaza. For me, it's absolutely horrific, and it takes me back to history, to when the Nazis introduced the typhus endemic, for example, into the concentration camps.
What is that, Vanessa? Can you please elaborate on that? It's a virus?
Yes, basically. I think it's waterborne virus, but it's a killer. And basically, according to many reports in medical journals, they introduced the endemic as a weapon of mass destruction, again, to kill off as many Jews as possible, not only Jews, of course, Romanis and communists and anyone that didn't comply with the ethno-supremacy of the Nazis. And really, in my view, this is what we're seeing again. There's absolutely not one iota of humanitarianism from Zionists towards Palestinians. There's more than 500 statements declaring the need for genocide from political, military, security leadership, and from the settlers themselves. They've been very clear about the fact that they want to see Palestinians exterminated, as does 80% of the population, according to Alistair Crook, who you mentioned earlier.
If I understood one of these comments correct, somebody says Zionists get a life racists, and I think that this person is confusing between a race and an ideology, because Zionist can be a Jew, can be a Christian, can be a Muslim. When we have Zionist Muslim Arabs in the Arab world, if you don't
Yeah,
believe me, you have to really be a little bit more active to see that Zionism is not about one race and one religion, and it's like a cross, let's say, a trans
yeah.
ethnicity or religious ideology.
It's an
I
ideology. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I promised the audience of Syriana Analysis that I will keep the conversation always like around 40 minutes, because
Sure.
people's attention span is becoming a little bit shorter nowadays. And when I see the statistics, people start watching the first 20 minutes and they like,
Yeah.
it's like the same thing with myself. So I will try to keep this like 40, 45 minutes as usual. And I would like to thank Vanessa Beeley, first of all, for dedicating the time for coming to this show, for the critical arguments that she presents. We are here brainstorming, guys. You can listen to what Vanessa says. You can believe her. You can do your own research. You can completely counter her arguments, all but conditioned with respect. This is what I'm just kindly asking for you. And if you want to follow Vanessa's work, she has her X account in the description below, and her Substack is in the description below. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Kevork, thanks for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure.
It's my pleasure always. And I would like to thank the hundreds of people who are watching this live streaming. I would like to kindly ask you guys, before leaving this live streaming, just to hit the like button, thumbs up before leaving, because this content can be reached to so many other people when you do that. And just a reminder for you, tomorrow, it's Wednesday. It's going to be the last live streaming before I go to 1 week of vacation. So I just want to repeat that for you to know that tomorrow is going to be a live streaming at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. But on Thursday, it's not going to be any live streaming. So peace be upon you and upon your families. And we'll see you tomorrow. Salam.